Ajay sir, we are live.
Very good morning to all of you, and welcome to the webinar on valuation and funding opportunities for startups during challenging times. This has been brought to you by ASSOCHAM, India's Apex Chamber for Commerce and Industry, and is also being supported by the Ministry of Electronics, Information Technology, Government of India, and the Venture Capital Association of India. We have very eminent panelists here with us on this webinar. We have Mr. Vicky Khosla, who's there to represent the e-commerce business. Then we also have Mr. Vicky Khosla is also the Chief Executive Officer of Infocom Network Limited. Then we also have Mr. Vikram Gupta, who's the founding managing partner, IV Cap Venture Advisors Private Limited. Then we also have Dr. Ajay Kumar Garg, who's Director, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India. Welcome, Dr. Garg. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
We also have Sri R. Ramanan, Mission Director with the Ethel Innovation Mission Niti Ayog. Mr. Ramanan, welcome to this webinar, and we will start now. And Mr. Anil Khaitan, who is the chairman of the ASSOCHAM Startup Council, will be joining us in a few minutes. So starting, I would request Dr. Ajay Garg, who is director with the Ministry of Electronics and IT, to spell out what are the ecosystem, what are the policy framework for startups, and how the Ministry of Electronics and IT is trying to help these startups grow up into bigger companies. Dr. Garg.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, ASSOCHAM, for giving us an opportunity to interact with such a large group of startups. Thank you for all the attendees who are there. We have a very learned panel to actually. We are going through a very difficult time as far as economy and the way the economy will actually reshape itself in the next few months. We have not seen a bigger challenge to the economy as such than post World War II, and we are actually in the similar situation. The way the business is being done and the way the business will be done will not be same. Technology will have a much deeper role to play in the future, and that's my personal belief, and that's the belief the Ministry of Electronics and IT has got. And here we have got to take a call whether that technology which will be actually running the businesses has to be inbound or has to come from outside. Obviously, the way the businesses will look at, and the Indian businesses will look at, is that how do they actually adopt the technology at the minimum of friction and with maximum of gains. So the first thing that the impact of the COVID which will have on business, because right now what the webinar is, and we'll talk about only businesses, is that how do they adopt technologies and where do they source the technologies. So for that, it's important to understand that the businesses will look towards startups as a means to adopt technologies and rejig their businesses, keeping technology in mind. And so that will be first funding opportunities or market opportunities for our startups. So we should be ready to showcase them. We should be ready to mature them to a scale that matured businesses can adopt them. And now also we have to differentiate between the post-COVID and the pre-COVID era. Many of the startups which might have had great relevance pre-COVID might not be having the same traction post-COVID, and many of the startups which did not have any traction pre-COVID might be companies which have a great opportunity post-COVID. The challenge in India right now is twofold. First, have we got enough technology companies matured enough to directly enter large businesses or get into the market? The second, if they have to mature quickly, where the funding will come from. Most of the funding that Indian startups were getting were from the venture funds that were from outside India and mostly from the West. We understand that the economy in the West and the challenges in the West are far greater as compared to us. and it will be a challenging time as far as Indian startups is concerned with regard to funding coming from the West. We need to create an ecosystem where the Indian funds flow into startup investments, and that too at a much more mature stage. Indian large corporates joining hands with the startups and creating the next wave of economic revolution that will happen. And if that happens seamlessly, it will be a great opportunity for India. And here the government has also got a very critical role to play. So let me figure out what we are doing in this regard. First of all, which are the technologies and solutions that will right away go into handling issues with regard to COVID? Many of the apps and the most recent app of Aragya Setu and others were solutions that were actually sourced from Indian technocrats, adopted by the government, and has been put into use. It's a very healthy sign to know that the government has become much more flexible to take in private sector support in solving challenges. We as a ministry has got a large number of programs that supports incubators. Whatever funds have been, all our 100+ incubators have been told to actually look at that how we can help the startup community as a whole with the type of supports already guaranteed under various schemes, whether it's a TIDE scheme and other schemes. We are looking towards formulating a specific proposal where we are taking inputs from the startups, the tech startups in particular, what challenges they are facing and what interventions they require from the government. As far as the funding is concerned, we recently in February 2019 came up with a national policy on software products, where we talked about a 5,000 crore software product development fund with government contribution of 1,000 crores. Looking into the fact that the 4,000 crores will be difficult to get from the private sector, we are looking at that how the large public sector investors can get into this to actually play a critical role in creating this corpus of 4,000. We are trying to fast track the launch of the SPDF for the startups as soon as possible. The other important aspect is that we need to create a buzz around that. If the future is around technologies, if the future of the way people interact has to be video conferencing and the webinar solutions of this kind, if the future has to be around the CRMs and all that, how does Indian entities play important role? The first such initiative was taken by the Honorable Minister with the blessings of the Prime Minister yesterday. We have launched a challenge for Indian video conferencing solution, which is at par with the world. The difference between this challenge and other challenges is that the government had upfront committed to be the first market for this. And so when the government has committed itself to be the first market, it creates a huge valuation increase if the solution is around. And we are not taking any IP or any control over the product. The product is free to market itself in India and globally. So that's a challenge that is there on our website of the our Mighty Startup Hub website. And I will request the startups and the large corporates to actually participate very enthusiastically and looks towards that in 3 months, we have a world-renowned video conferencing solution from India. That does few things. That gives us confidence that we can have digital solutions or digital products at par with the rest of the world. That gives us, if the services, there is a shift in the services industry and there is a job offset from the services industry, then the product space should actually be there ready to provide those opportunities. That's the way we are looking at things. We are actually fast tracking the various policies and the schemes that have to be there in the national policy on software product to see to it that in next 3 years, the contribution in the IT industry from the product side becomes 1/3 of the total market size. So these are some of the few things that we are doing. We are there, we are working day in and day night. We understand the pain and the challenges the startups are facing right now, and we are there, and we will be very and we will not leave any stone unturned to support them to remain afloat and to grow as soon as possible. The last thing what I will say is that India has got 500 plus incubators. The startups at the early stage are being supported in all possible ways in India. The government of India, through either through the NITI Aayog or through the DPIIT or through the Department of Science and Technology or Department of Biotechnology or MIT, has various schemes and policies in place to support the early stage, ideation stage startup. The need for today is that to bridge the gap between the funder or the venture capitalist and the companies coming out of such incubators. We do not have a battery of such powerful accelerators which can actually bridge this gap. We have started this process. The first 3 accelerators have already been put into place. One of them, we have taken support of ASSOCHAM also to put this such accelerators in place. So unless and until we grow our startups into large corporate, the gains of such startup ecosystem will not start flowing into the economy. So that's my early thoughts on this, and I like to hear from others on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Garg. Dr. Garg is also Director, Ministry of Electronics and IT, and he's also heading the International Cooperation Division, and he is an alumnus of IIT Kanpur. Dr. Garg, thank you so much, and we'll have a few questions later during the webinar. Moving forward, friends, we have Mr. Ramanan, who's Mission Director with NITI Aayog, Ethel Innovation Mission, and he's heading this flagship National Innovation Initiative of the Prime Minister at NITI Aayog, and with the aims goal are to establish and promote a vibrant culture of innovation and entrepreneurship nationwide. So I request Mr. Ramanan, Director, Ethel Innovation Mission, NITI Aayog, to share his thoughts on the occasion.
Thank you, Ajay, and good afternoon to everybody on the call, and I hope everyone is safe. And also, thank you, ASSOCHAM, for giving this wonderful opportunity for sharing a few thoughts on this occasion, because India is not only going through a crisis, but it is also the home for more than 30,000 startups right now. We have, as Dr. Garg pointed out, more than 300 to 400 incubators in our country. And India's future is actually going to be driven by innovation, by entrepreneurship, by startups, and we have to be able to create thousands of job creators in our country, as is necessary for the population that we have, 1.3 billion people, spread over 715 districts, 600,000 villages in our country, and we have also 115 aspirational districts need to be taken care of. So, Ethel Innovation Mission has been engaged in creating and promoting an ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship across India, and we have taken a rather holistic approach to ensure that. Very briefly, at the school level, we have launched thousands of tinkering labs, which can create and promote a problem-solving, innovative mindset in our school students. So to date, we have launched 5,000 plus Ethel tinkering labs across the country. Each of these labs are dedicated innovation workspaces with 3D printing, robotics, IoT, miniaturized electronics, augmented virtual reality, do-it-yourself kits, so that the students from grade 6 to grade 12 have a chance to actually become problem solvers, solving problems in and around the community, leveraging emerging technologies. And in this COVID crisis, actually, over the last 2 weeks, we have launched a number of online do-it-yourself modules also for young students in artificial intelligence, in game development, in CollabCAD, CAD/CAM 3D design, so that when the schools reopen, they can start doing 3D printing and print their artifacts and designs using these tools. The second important initiative that Ethel Innovation Mission has undertaken is to launch more than 100 incubators across the country. And these are spread across the country, not just in the metro cities, but also in the rural and urban and tier 2, tier 3 cities. To date, out of these 100 plus incubators, 70 are already operational, fully operational. The remaining will become operational during the course of this year. And more than 1,500 startups have been operational over the last couple of 16 to 18 months. The idea here is, again, to have diversity of geography in our setting up of the incubators, diversity of gender. We have 500 plus women startups in this ecosystem, and to have to ensure that there is diversity of areas, biotech, agri-tech, and so on, which are of national importance. The third initiative, in order to promote startups and to promote innovation, is the Ethel Community Innovation Centers, which are being set up in the underserved regions of the country, particularly in tier 2, tier 3 cities, as well as in the rural, urban, hilly, or coastal districts of the country. We have already selected out of more than 900 applications, 25 to be operational during the course of the next few months. And during the next couple of years, we'll be launching 150 such Ethel Community Innovation Centers, which is a unique public-private sector partnership, unlike the others where government is the main contributor for setting up the incubators or the tinkering labs. Here, there will be an equal matching contribution by the private sector, by NGOs, who will be collaborating in setting up these community innovation centers, so that much needed innovations can actually benefit all the entire communities. And today being Community Day, I'm very happy to share that this particular activity is gaining momentum across the country. And the fourth initiative that we are launching right now is called Arise, for Applied Research and Innovation for Small Enterprises. This is mainly to stimulate the MSME industry into innovations. We are working along with the ministries. And here the ministries will not only help in identifying challenges which need to be taken up by the MSME sector to reduce import dependence and to be able to create export technologies, but we will also, as Dr. Garg pointed out just now, the ministries will also become the first buyer of the innovations that happen, because this is very important. You have market-driven innovation and you have a need-driven innovation, and therefore startups across the country will have an opportunity not only to develop a product, but also to be able to see it implemented and to see it grow. And finally, we have also launched what are known as Ethel New India Challenges. This is slightly different. The target is not just the MSME industry, but also any innovator or even large company who can partner with a startup. And we have launched 24 such challenges along with the Ministry of Urban Housing Development, Ministry of Water, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, as well as Ministry of Agriculture. And 52 winners have been selected, to whom up to 1 crore of grant will be given in order for them to be able to support these innovations. Now, as Dr. Garg pointed out, we are in challenging times. And the whole idea of developing this ecosystem is to create dependency and inter-networking between all the parties. We are actually creating a network of resources rather than silo incubators and silo startups. And this network of incubators and this network of venture capitalists, mentors, and so on is what is going to be very helpful to the entire startup community. In fact, during the last 3-4 weeks, those of you who are aware, a COVID-19 solutions task force, in order to solicit solutions that would be relevant to the COVID-19 crisis and which would be deployable within the next 3 to 6 months, has been launched. We have got more than 1,000 applications which are relevant innovations for this COVID-19 from the startup community. And not only that, we have got the entire network of VCs as well as investors supporting this. and offering support in various categories where the startup would need help if you want to deploy it, if you want to scale it, or if you want to test it. And so the support comes under multiple categories. One is financial support, of course, funding support, but the other is manufacturing support, logistics, management support, supply chain management support, testing labs, access support. And at one place, we are collecting all this information. By next week, we'll be announcing the shortlisted solutions, and we will also be launching on ensuring that their solutions can be supported by the private sector as well as by the government. Now, this is going to be the modus operandi over the next couple of months following this COVID-19 crisis, because the government is seized upon the fact that, yes, we have to support all the startups, which is going to be the future of our country. And at the same time, the private sector has been drawn in, perhaps due to the circumstances, but this is something that is going to last now, because there is a great awareness about the potential of startup solutions and the way they can be supported. And India's problems are pretty diverse. So this COVID-19 has revealed a few things. For example, the whole migration and urban migration issue. So we are working closely with urban housing and development to see how we can ensure decentralized development across the country. And we have 100 smart cities identified, but we don't have the necessary innovations and startups to be able to really make them into smart cities and to be able to generate employment locally rather than have this huge migration happening. So there are a number of challenges which are going to come up where you're going to have immediate applications following the COVID-19 crisis, and the usage and leverage of digital technology in all of this, as Dr. Garg said, is going to be extremely important, because we are going to have that being leveraged to reach across to the remotest parts of the country and ensure that there is uniform development. So there is in this a silver lining for all the startups, that there are going to be many new solutions that are going to be required to be developed over the next several months and years. And number two, you already have a massive integration of public and private sector with the government due to this crisis, but something that is going to help build up continuously and which is going to reinforce the recovery mechanism. So with that, I will currently stop. I just wanted to add one more thing, and that is, in order to support all of this, we have created a huge Mentor India Mentors of Change network. More than 10,000 people who are professionals, who are scholars or researchers or experts or specialists have registered themselves as mentors of change. And we are ensuring that these people get allocated or associated with the tinkering labs, with the incubators, challenges that we are launching. And therefore, all of you who are on this call have an opportunity to register yourself as mentors of change, where you think you can help and you can contribute to the growth of this innovation ecosystem. So with that, I will pause, and thanks Ajay-ji and Dr. Garg and Gupta and Mr. Khosla for giving this opportunity to share a little bit on this occasion.
Thank you, Dr. Ramanan, Mission Director, Ethel Innovation Mission, who's there with us from Niti Aayog. Thank you so much for being here with us, sir. Moving forward, we have now Mr. Anil Khaitan, who's already joined, but we can't see, but we can talk to him. Mr. Khaitan, are you there, sir?
Yes, Ajay, I'm here.
Sir, our apologies for the technical glitch, sir, and welcome to this webinar. Mr. Anil Khaitan is also the immediate past president of the PhD Chamber of Commerce Industry, and is also the chairman, ASSOCHAM chairman for the National Council on Startups, and the ASSOCHAM Startup Council has done a phenomenal work. Mr. Anil Khaitan has traveled across the country to the tier 2 and tier 3 cities to shortlist, to select some of these young talent startups from across the country in the last 1 year. And there has been a successful ASSOCHAM launchpad, startup launchpad undertaken under his initiative, under his leadership. Mr. Khaitan, thank you so much for being here, sir, with us, and request you to share a few thoughts on this occasion.
Thank you, Ajay, and a very good afternoon to my fellow panelists and to everybody listening to this video conferencing. It's a fact that COVID-19 pandemic, along with the lockdown, which followed in India and other countries, has had a devastating impact on the startup ecosystem. There have been numerous reports on employee layoffs, cutting down of startup valuations, investors pulling out of funding rounds, and a slowdown in the overall business performance of startups. Two primary reasons behind the flux in the ecosystem are uncertainty and panic. With the sudden turn in events, the operations of Indian startups are poised to witness a series of fundamental changes, but the question remains, how fruitful will this be for the overall health of the economy? Taking the positive side of this current COVID and this whole pandemic, which I think right from the days of Mahabharata till now, the world has never seen the entire world going under lockdown. So being positive on the startups, because I feel startups are going to be one of the future uh, contributors to our GDP in a big way. So for investors, I feel it's a glorious period. Startups, they would like to pick up at lesser values, and hopefully investors would invest in a lot more startups with the similar spends. It is very evident that India would grow faster post-COVID, of course. And this essentially means we would be investing in our infrastructure, health, cities, etc. A good opportunity again, and sectors to look at from investor standpoint. The job loss in certain sectors would also mean that great talent might be released, which would be willing to work for startups at a lesser salary bills, essentially meaning startups would be able to hire better and top quality talent. The digital transformation and technology adaptation would also happen at a much faster pace now. We are currently only scratching the surface, and now the markets would open up immensely. For instance, internet penetration would also happen at a faster pace. Companies like Reliance Jio would basically stand out in this. Make in India and make for India would mean startups and businesses would have an opportunity to build businesses for our 1.3 billion people, like the Honorable Minister Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad has just announced that they would work with startups to build solutions for video conferencing. Online startups, in my perception, would find it easy to attract customers, thus reducing customer acquisition costs. Consumers from all demographics are spending more time online, whether on program management tools, video conferencing apps, or social media. And startups that can alter their engagement and activation processes will see greater engagement. Government spending in the startup sector, I personally feel, would increase multifold over a period. The SIDBI has launched the COVID-19 Startup Assistance Scheme as an interim arrangement to provide working capital financing from its balance sheet to startups over the next 45 to 60 days. The education system in India, in my perception, will change for good. Majorly, STEM education in MOOC format would become a norm and would be acceptable. Then I feel hyperlocal would be the way of life. Smaller startups solving hyper local problems in agriculture, health, and education at their village level, at their block level, at their district level. This would also mean vernacular language offerings, which is very, very important for our country, would also become a mainstream. But the startups should prepare to have a runway for 9 to 12 months post lockdown, as markets will reopen very slowly. That too all depends as to how the COVID cases go on. E-gaming and OTT platforms would also see huge surge in demand. And lastly, I feel that non-essential spends on fashion, food, and travel will be the slowest to pick up, since people will be cautious even post-lockdown. Consumers are in survival mode, and these items are the last on their to-do list. So these were some of my points which I would like, which I wanted to flag off before everybody. And I would like to thank everybody for a patient hearing, and thank you for your time. Ajay, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Khaitan. I'll request Mr. Vicky Khosla, who's also a successful businessman, entrepreneur, founder of TradeIndia.com, and also brother of Mr. Vinod Khosla, who's also a senior investor and venture capitalist, founder of Sun Microsystem in US. Mr. Khosla, welcome to this webinar and request you to share your thoughts on the occasion.
Thank you, Ajay, and thank you, SHM and the fellow panelists to give me a chance to speak. You know, I agree there's a big challenge in front of the world, and India being one of it. But I also see a lot of opportunity for startups in this challenge. You know, what I personally feel is uh, people will behave very differently after this coronavirus stops, and the way business is going to be done may be quite different from what it is done today. So when things change, opportunities come. You know, I was just talking to one of the companies. I've invested in about 50 odd startups, so I keep interacting with these startups and trying to see what they're doing and how they're coping up with coronavirus and things like that. So one of them I was talking to was saying biometrics is over in uh, offices. Nobody's going to accept it. What is going to happen next? For example, I'm just giving small examples. Attendance still needs to be marked. So why not facial recognition, attendance marking? So that's just one opportunity. Then I was talking to another one. He says, you know, they are into AR and VR. Okay, so they were talking about that is where the opportunity is going to be. Like nobody might go to a showroom to see a car, but if you can see every feature of the car online, things may be different. You might start looking at it. You might not go to showrooms. So what I feel is there's certain industry like Anilji had touched, which are going to hurt and going to take a lot of time to come back, like the hotel industry or the travel industry or aviation or restaurants, conferences, and those kind of things, or apparels from that example. You know, I may stop buying clothes for the next 1 year. Probably I don't need it. I used to buy because I felt like so, but that consumer behavior would change now, I feel. But the opportunities, if I see, they lie in education. Nobody had thought that in Delhi schools would do classes, proper classes on video conferencing, but it's happening, you know, and people are working from home, you know, and have realized that it is possible to work from home. So what is going to happen? What could happen? I'm just taking an example. Real estate industry might get hit. People will take smaller offices to rent tomorrow. But as far as education is concerned, there's a big opportunity there. If you're a startup, you should look at that. You know, I've been seeing people doing yoga through online, doing Pilates classes online, doing the exercises. Personal trainers have come online. That's where how things are going to change. And healthcare is again going to be very big, or hygiene is going to be very big. One of the companies I was talking to recently said they were developing a technology because nobody wants to order food from a restaurant today because they're not sure of the hygiene. So that's where the problem is. Now, what is the solution? They said, we are developing a technology where we'll offer to Zomato and Swiggy and the restaurants where live streaming of the kitchen can be done and the customer can see it. And once the customer is satisfied and can see it live that his kitchen is hygienic, he might order. So the trust factor which is lost has to be gained. So I'm just giving some examples of opportunities, you know. And if you look at education, you know, it's massive. And you know, I was just talking to my team, and I said even the small kirana stores will understand that what they need is they need a 1-page, 2-page website. They will like to go online, take orders, and accept payments. They don't want fancy things, but these are the opportunities which are going to be around. And as startups, I think you should start looking at these kind of opportunities. I know you've been running startups and you've got a fixed idea, but businesses need to change, and they will change, and you need to pivot. So startups and founders who have issues in pivoting or are too much in love with their ideas have sometimes an issue. So the world is changing, everything's changed, and pre-corona things will change more. So I think you need to look at these kind of opportunities where these opportunities are and move that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khosla Sahab, and I'll request our investor fund, Mr. Vikram Gupta, who's also the founder and managing partner of Ivy Cap Venture. Mr. Gupta has almost 22 years of experience in investment and consulting, and he's also worked with IBM in the past and alumnus of IIT Delhi. Mr. Gupta, over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, and thanks a lot to SHM for this opportunity. I think the advantage of speaking in the end is that you have hardly anything else to say. But I think I will definitely try to touch upon a few very important points, focusing on the specific issues we're talking about in terms of valuation and funding. To begin with, I think Dr. Garg actually raised some very, very important points, and I think he specifically talked about the gap in funding, and I think that's a very real problem. And I must say that we are seeing very positive things happening within the government. Very, very real actions happening in terms of addressing those gaps. And of course, still a long way to go in terms of really bridging the large gap that we have. But we as venture capital funds, we raised over 1,000 crores of domestic capital, which is not easy to raise otherwise, most of it coming from the Indian institutions. And I think we need to build more and more of that domestic capital. So I would like to also try and look at from the entrepreneur's perspective. And of course, we all know these are unprecedented times, and we are all experiencing a very unique situation. We are currently dealing with the issues of uncertainty and fear. Of course, the fear of contacting a highly contagious disease whose solution has not yet been found. But challenges always offer newer opportunities. Entrepreneurs who are able to create opportunities in such times create far more value for themselves and their stakeholders. In difficult situations like these, most entrepreneurs worry about the value of their business, and it is very important to differentiate between the value and valuation of the business. So let's try and understand the funding opportunities at these times. So, especially in situations like these, it's very, very hard to raise capital. Most of the investors globally are, holding on to their capital, not making fresh investments very actively, and they are waiting for the right opportunities to come. However, there are long-term investors, looking maybe beyond 7 years, 8 years of investment horizon, who may be very selectively looking at making investment opportunities right now. So in fact, investors, for example, coming from Japan, are still quite actively looking at Indian market even in these times. My suggestion is always, to the entrepreneurs in terms of how to create their own capital internally. And there are very, very interesting ways. Of course, most of these methods people already know about. Things like, obviously, the most fundamental is, to conserve capital, to cut costs in all possible ways, all non-essential and indirect costs. Second is to improve your cash flows by looking at your working capital management. So, of course, wherever there are possibilities, you should try to do that. Third is explore soft loans options. And of course, we talked about earlier, SIDBI has come up with some very interesting funding, soft loans. Then we talked about, government has come up with some very good initiatives in terms of giving soft loans. And of course, there are certain COVID challenges which are being run by the Department of Biotechnology, Department of Science and Technology. We ourselves ran a COVID challenge recently through our platform called IV Camp, where we got almost about 75 entries, and we've already shortlisted a few which are very, very interesting and innovative. The other source of capital for the entrepreneurs is their existing investors. Of course, your existing investors are, they know you quite well. They understand the issues, and they may be your best bet when you're looking to raise some capital. And of course, if the above measures do not adequately meet your requirements, then you have to go out and raise capital. But the challenge then comes, of course, at what valuation, right? So, in fact, this is one of the biggest questions that the entrepreneurs are facing today. Should I go and raise capital right now? What will the valuation be at this time? And of course, one has to look at it from the perspective of, how do you see the current situation, and you have to look at your pre-COVID scenario and whether you will be come back in the post-COVID scenario. And I think Mr. Khaitan talked very specifically about sectors that are expected to continue to play an important role, and the newer sectors that are going to emerge. And I think some of those sectors, of course, will gain a lot of traction. The valuation itself, I think the way I would define valuation, it's a measure of value of mutual trust between two parties. So effectively, especially at the very early stage, at the seed stage, it's very, very hard to actually put a number, and therefore, it's almost like valuing an entrepreneur's idea and the hope that the entrepreneur has. So I think typically the way I would look at it is the valuation would depend on various factors, including opportunity cost of capital. So of course, if you look at the current market, if the investor has to make an investment, if they have a better option to invest as compared to your business, then of course they will look for that. But in the current situation, you would be measured on a relative scale as compared to an absolute scale. So which means that if you have performed better than your peers in terms of how you manage your costs in the short term, were you nimble enough to really address specific issues? Were you able to address your employee concerns in the short term? Were you able to create new revenue streams? And the new revenue streams which I see in the short term, two specific streams. One is the government has come up with a lot of initiatives. So anything that can align to the government initiatives can create new revenue streams. And the second is there's a lot of CSR funding which is coming available specifically to fight COVID issues. And I think there, if your business is nimble enough to actually utilize your existing capacities and resources, you would be able to create your short-term cash flows. The second thing which is important is the demand and supply situation at the time of investing. And I think if the investors just hold back and they're not going to invest in this space, of course, there will be a paucity of capital, which is likely scenario which is building up. But there will be investors who would still want to invest, as I was saying earlier, because they would be looking at long-term returns, and therefore the entrepreneurs need to look for those investors who are actually continuing to look to invest even in these times. A third one is a bargaining power of the investor vis-a-vis that of the entrepreneur, and vice versa. And there a lot depends on what business you're in, and especially if you're in the business of digital education or digital healthcare or even digital banking or financing. I think these are high demand, high supply areas where there could be interesting equation in terms of the bargaining power between the investors and the entrepreneurs. And the last is important as the time frame of the investment. Typically, investors have a VC investors would have a 5-year time frame, but some of the Japanese investors, for example, will look for maybe about 8 to 10 years or even longer time frames. At IVCAP, we arrive at the valuation based on various factors that include nature of the business, the industry segment, conviction in the team's ability to execute the business and raise further rounds of funding, stage of the business, unit economics, the business metric at the time of our exit point. So we actually build that model over a period of time. The key terms of the investment in terms of, in such scenarios, investors may want to really negotiate hard on some of the key terms like liquidation preference, especially because the capital is at a very, very high risk at this time. So they might ask for 2x, 3x kind of LP clauses. And it also depends on what's the quality of investors you have in your existing cap table. In the end, I would like to say that in such times, entrepreneurs should focus more internally to generate pools of capital, because raising external capital is not going to be easy. Preserve value rather than focus on valuation. Stay close to your customers, your employees, your existing investors, and your stakeholders. And you're not alone in this fight. Everyone is going through the same challenges. Yes, many industry dynamics are going to change substantially. Be aware of those challenges and be nimble to mold yourself as per the changing dynamic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vikram Gupta. And gentlemen, we have a few minutes left and we have a lot of questions popping on the screen. So I request the panel to kindly let's take a few of these questions with your permission. Can we, sir?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So we have a question all the way from Pune, Mr. Satish Badani. He's asking a question. Being a food processing startup based out of Pune, we would like to know how the food industry going to come out post-COVID India. What kind of support we should expect with respect to funding to enhance Indian food processing capabilities and support to our farmers? Dr. Garg, Mr. Ramanan, if you could throw some light on this question, please. And of course, the other panelists.
I think this is a very important point. In fact, among the incubators that we are supporting, almost 35 to 40% of the incubators today which have come up are agri-tech based incubators. And there is a huge demand for agri-tech incubators from multiple perspectives. One is, of course, the productivity and so on and so forth. But the more important aspect is the value adding innovations that can happen to the food industry. And we're also working very closely with the Ministry of Food Processing in India, and we are launching some challenges, specific challenges which they face in terms of storage management, in terms of supply chain management, as well as in terms of distribution and so on. So I do think there is a very good opportunity. There is also a lot of startups who are engaged in how do we ensure that not only is the multiple crops can be derived from the same farm or from the same fields, but how do we also address problems like the climate change problem or the burning hay burning problem in different parts of the country. I think there is a wonderful opportunity for agri-tech startups and food startups to address, and the current crisis also brings out some very important issues related to distribution and related to service delivery in these areas.
Thank you, Ajay. I'll just briefly touch upon it. Like, if you are talking about doubling the income of the farmer, that means basically the rural economy has to grow. What we look at is that there is a lack of entrepreneurship around rural economy. The food processing industry and all this is a way forward, and a lot of happening in the agri-tech, as Dr. Ramanan rightly said. The problem is how do you actually give an access to the market? If Bikiji will, Ms. Khosla will agree with me, the problem with the e-commerce world is that it is more trained around brands and urban products. The rural products find little visibility, maybe due to quality, maybe there are many other reasons, as Ramanan also said, that logistics might be an issue and all that. So what we are coming up with a very novel concept of a digital platform for rural businesses, because what we have seen through Aadhaar and other things is the platforms are a way forward to future economy, and the public platforms have to play a key fundamental role in such platform economy. So what we are doing is trying to create a digital platform where we are trying to create an interface layer of modern entrepreneurs between an artisan or a farmer and the urban business. And this platform will try to interconnect with various private e-commerce players across the country to give a direct access to this to the market. So that's the only type of support we think, that we have to create large markets around it. The innovation in the food processing exists. If we give them market, there will be a boom of innovation around the rural businesses.
I totally agree with you, Ajay. This is what is needed. If the government could do something like that, it will really help out these food processing companies and food companies and the farmers. Thanks.
Mr. Gupta, I have a question from Mr. Amrish Moore. Mr. Vikram Gupta, how do these startups contact the funds in the initial stage? What should be the best way to reach out to the funds in the initial stage of the startups? Mr. Vikram Gupta.
Yeah, there are obviously most of the funds. First of all, to get the list of the funds itself, there is a list available on SEBI website. All the SEBI registered funds are there on SEBI website itself. Second is DPIIT. The registered startups have access to the DPIIT channel itself to access various investors. The third is, of course, and the one which I believe is most reliable is always go through someone, some reference, because otherwise, typically what happens, investors get a very large number of opportunities on a daily basis. Very hard to really physically be able to evaluate each and every startup beyond a certain time. So if you believe that you really need to get more time with investors, then it's always better to go through a reference, which I've seen work very well with most of the investors. So these are some of the ways startups can approach investors.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question from Mr. Raj Dubal for Dr. Ajay Garg. Can we have any scheme from government where proven startups can get funds? And also, where shall I get all these government schemes to be part of? Where do we get all this information from? Do we have a central platform where we can have access to the funds and the information? Dr. Garg.
I think Dr. Ramanan will be the better person to answer this, but on your behalf, Ramanan, I'll try to answer. There is a COVID task force that is actually trying to correlate all the information with regard to the various schemes, policies, and initiatives taken by the government and the private sector with regard to COVID. And this is being collated and put onto the Startup India website. That is the first step that the government is taking, and many things have been collated and already there on the Startup India website. Secondly, we are taking inputs from the 100 more supported startup incubators that we have from what are the pains and challenges that startups are facing from our incubators. And that's not limited to startups supported under MITI. And we are trying to take those inputs, and we are trying to take inputs from the various industry bodies also. What are the challenges? And we will rightfully come up with something which actually addresses these pains. Thank you.
Mr. Ramanan, would you like to
add? Just add, I think Dr. Garg covered it comprehensively. Please register any solutions that you have related to COVID-19 on the Startup India portal. There is a portion under the www.startupindia.gov.in. There is one section on COVID-19 challenge, and so please post the solutions. Now, when you post it there, April 15th, by the way, is the last date, so you still have one more day. Of course, we'll keep it open after that, but we're going to take immediate action on the ones which have been entered till April 15th. We are also asking you to provide details of support that you need. We have collected information about all the organizations, including private sector, investors, capital, venture capitalists, and so on, who are willing to support in different categories. And we will be ensuring that we match the support requirement that you need to deploy your solution to the solution itself, the partner who can provide the solution or provide the support. So all of this is going to be made available on the website, and you'll have full access to it. And as Dr. Garg said, it is open to not only the startup solutions from a particular department, but it is open to any startup solutions across the country who may not belong to any particular incubator, but still have a valid solution to propose.
Right. Thank you. We have another question from Mr. Pradeep Kumar. Mr. Khaitan, are you still there, sir?
Yeah, I'm here.
There's a question from Mr. Pradeep Kumar. How and what funding are available for the pharma, R&D or pilot plant or small manufacturing unit to start? And where can we get all these contacts from? Mr. Khaitan, you could also throw some light on it, sir. You also run a pharma unit, and maybe the other fellow panel.
Well, I think we'll have to wait for the guidelines tomorrow as to first as to what are the industries. I mean, how the lockdown will open so far as industry and commerce is concerned, and what some of the banks say, for instance, State Bank, they have come up with a scheme that 10% of your funded limit they are sanctioning and disbursing within about 10 days. So, I mean, that's one scheme. At least I know State Bank of India has come out with. I also know Union Bank of India has come out with. In fact, State Bank of India had come out with this scheme in a pre-lockdown. So, I mean, that's one area where I think the government should consider, and so should the RBI, that across the board, if they can give a 30 or 35% increase of the funded limits, and also take care of the non-funded limits, because the letter of credits have not yet been addressed by the RBI, and a lot of companies, LCs, are now devolving. It will affect their rating, so on and so forth. So I think the RBI basically has to be more sort of lenient considering the whole situation, because until they issue strictures, I find banks practically don't follow, because they follow RBI's instruction far more than they follow the government's instruction. I mean, that is the practical case which I have seen. And the next thing which I already said was that, you know, SIDBI has already started a COVID-19 startup assistance scheme as an interim arrangement to provide working capital financing. So I think that's one area where the startups could at least approach SIDBI and see if they are eligible for the loan and try to get the loan if it's possible. So, I mean, that's my answer to this question, Ajay.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else would like to add? Pharma R&D support. Sir, we are almost at the end, and we are already overrunning time. So maybe we could just take one more question, last question. Dr. Garg, I know you also need to leave. So I'll just see if I can still checking some numbers. Or otherwise, I'll request. There's one question for Mr. Ramnan. Preeti Pongu Ventures. This is Preeti, Women Empowerment Officer from KR Innovation Center, National Engineering College, Kovilpatti, Tamil Nadu. My question is for Sri Ramananji, Niti Aayog. He mentioned 25 applicants being selected from over 900 applications. Is this for AIM or ACIC? We are in the process of applying for ACIC and would like some pointers from him. Dr. Ramnan, Mr. Ramnan, sir.
Yeah, the 25 number that I mentioned is ACIC, Ethel Community Innovation Centers. That list has been shortlisted, and they are now in the process of final due diligence by the Ethel Innovation Mission. And but this application is still open, so we are taking several drops of the application at different points in time. So we have kept the application open so that new people who want to apply for it can apply. And but the ones which have already been selected will be now completing their due diligence, and then we'll be making the disbursements for them.
Right. Thank you so much. And I believe now we already past 1 o'clock. And any last comments, Mr. Khaitan, Mr. Khosla, Mr. Garg, Mr. Ramnan, Mr. Gupta, if you would like to make last comments, and then we'll continue.
I think it was a good initiative by SHM to have a seminar like this, and I think we saw good participation. And in these kind of times, these kind of seminars should be done more often, I think. Thank you, Ajay and SHM. And fellow panelists.
So we had, yeah, please go ahead.
No, I was saying I totally agree with that, seeing such a good response for this kind of a seminar. Almost 400 participants are looking for this. It's a great response.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah,
So
Dr. Garg.
the solace that we get in this very difficult times is the way the large industry and the large industry bodies are coming forward to support. And this is so heartening to see, and we see that there is a lot of hope in future. Thank you, SHM, for taking this in.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Ramnan.
I just want to add that this crisis is something that we all have to work together to get over with quickly, and I hope it does. But at the same time, great crises like this throw up great opportunities, and it is through such discussions and such sharing of views that one can start reflecting on what are the new opportunities. And thank you, Ajay and SHM, for enabling this entire discussion.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Khaitan, can I request you to make a quick closing remark, sir?
Yeah, on behalf of SHM, I'd like to thank each and every panelist for their such valuable contributions. I'd like to thank everybody for spending time and listening to us. And philosophically speaking, as a famous line goes, that even this too shall pass. So let's keep fighting, follow what our Prime Minister says, and even this too shall pass away. And let's hope that the guidelines which he has said will come out tomorrow give us some hope, give us some motivation that on the economy side, government is doing something, but of course in a controlled manner. So I would like to thank SHM, Ajay, and personally thank you for moderating this entire session. Thank you so much.
Thank you all, sir, especially all our attendees and delegates who registered. Yes, sir. Someone was saying, yeah. Gupta sir.
No, I just wanted to thank you, Ajay, and thank everyone for organizing this. And I think this is very rightly timed. And we keep hearing all these questions from entrepreneurs, and of course, there's a genuine worry right now in terms of what's going to happen. And everybody seems to have a similar concern. And I think something like this is very useful for the entrepreneurs, at this time.
So thank you once again, and all the attendees, delegates, and my team working from behind. Thank you all, and we look forward to many more meaningful webinars in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.